Hey, thank you so much for joining us at our Crosspoint Church podcast. Now, if you're new to our podcast or maybe new to our church in general, we're just a bunch of messed up people who don't have it all together, running after a heavenly leader who loves us and meets us right where we are. We hope this message encourages you, builds your faith, and strengthens your confidence as you continue down this journey of what it means to know and follow Jesus. Enjoy this message.
Hey, welcome again to Crosspoint. Let's give it up one more time for this amazing band leading us this weekend, Kyle and Morgan and the whole team. Thanks for kicking us off in such a great way. My name is Abbie, if we've not met, and I am so excited to get to be with you, whether you are here in the room or one of the many joining us online this week as it's spring break for a lot of people in our community. Let's make some noise for those who are joining us. We're only like a little bit bitterly cheering for those of you who are like in really fun places right now tuning in. But really, we're so glad that you're here and excited to kick off this week leading up to Easter. We're going to spend a lot of time today really focusing on how can we prepare ourselves for the things that are to come. And I have to tell you, as we've been planning things here at Crosspoint and getting ready for next weekend, specifically what we're going to experience here together, I am so excited about some of the things that are in store. I'm telling you, you are not going to want to miss this. And so would really encourage you to begin making a plan now for what that's going to look like for you. I know we all have probably a long list of things that we're practically doing to get prepared for Easter, like, buy candy, get all the ingredients you need, set up the gathering plans, that kind of stuff. But would encourage you to add to that list, or maybe even take some time right now to start thinking through when you think about celebrating Easter at Crosspoint, when are you going to come join us? As Scott mentioned earlier, we will be here all weekend long, starting next Thursday at this time, and then, of course, on Sunday and all week online. But this is one of those weekends where it's worth prioritizing being in person because of what we get to experience in the room. And so hope that you'll begin to put that on your calendar now. Also, begin to think about who might you invite to come sit alongside you. Is there someone in your life that this is a great opportunity for you to say, hey, why don't you come and check this out with me? Again, as the host mentioned earlier, if you want to help us make this a great experience for other people, we would love to plug you into a one-time serve opportunity throughout this next weekend. You can hit this QR code and let us know that you're interested, and you'll be hearing from us this week. There's some really fun extra things that are going to be a part of this weekend, and so we would love your help pulling that off if that's something that you're available to do. But one thing before we jump into what we're doing the rest of tonight, I would love to take a moment for us to just take a second to pray for the things that are coming over this next week. And so let's do that now. God, I thank you for who you are, for the way that you meet us, and for the particularly special moment that Easter brings to us. God, we pray now for the things that you are going to do in this room, in us, in the people who are going to be a part of this gathering and so many others next week. God, we pray for those who are on the fence, who are trying to make a decision about whether or not they're going to engage in Easter this year. God, would you bring people to our minds that perhaps need to experience the things that we're going to get to experience together next weekend. And God, I thank you that we don't have to wait until then to encounter you, that every day, every moment is an opportunity where you are reaching out to us, inviting us to see you, to connect with you, to grow. And so, God, we pray that that is what we would experience together in this time that we have today. Amen. All right, so, that video that we watched earlier connects a lot to a conversation that I had recently with a friend. I was talking with a couple of friends, actually, about how hard it is to explain what Easter is about to our young kids. And as you can see, that was kind of some prime examples of how it's just a complicated story. It's hard to figure out the right words to help your kids understand. And it reminded me of a couple of things that happened when when my son was quite a bit younger, when he was 2 or 3. There was this one Easter where we were gathering with some of my extended family, and my mom pulled out these things called resurrection eggs. Maybe you've seen these before or heard of them. If you've not, basically what these are is it's this carton of eggs that's designed to help kids kind of in a tactile way tell the story of Easter. But what always happens when I've seen these pulled out places is kids like flock to them. They gather around all excited because they see Easter eggs and they think, candy, money, all the things that are normally in there. But then there's just these like trinkets. And so you kind of watch the internal dialogue as they're like, okay, is this going to get better? And like the last one is empty, I think. And so that's like even the cherry on top. But anyways, it is a cute idea. And so my mom and my grandma had gathered my son and the other kids that were there around, and they were kind of walking through these eggs, and they got to the one that is meant to represent the Last Supper, the final meal that Jesus shares with his friends. And in it, there's this little wine chalice that looks like this. And at that point, my son's face lit up, and he yells at me across the room, "Mom, look, it's the cup you always get at the restaurant." And my mom and grandma looked back at me as if this was me every night. They're like a little concerned and not super thrilled that was my son's takeaway. So after that, my mom got pretty determined to kind of double down and try to help my son understand the story of Easter. And so she started teaching them this jingle that had some motions to it that, again, was another tool designed to help kids begin to grasp some of the main points of Jesus's story. And one day, while they were working on this, she was watching him while I was at work, and she sent me a video of their progress. Now, before we watch this, I do want to give you a little warning that this is kind of PG-13. So I'm sorry. Some of you are not going to like this. It's kind of classic little boy. He was also in a phase where he was learning a lot of things about his body. So here was his 3-year-old take on the story of Easter. So you all can judge my parenting accordingly, but, he just missed the point a little bit. Now, if you know my son, if you're maybe a volunteer with him in Upstreet, first of all, thank you for making church a place that he's always excited to be at. But also, do me a favor and maybe don't bring this up with him. He thinks it's pretty funny now, but I don't think he'll think it's funny to, talk to a bunch of people about it. So thanks in advance for that. It's easy for kids to miss the plot of Easter. But, it's not just something that kids experience. As adults, we experience this too in a different way. Maybe you found yourself showing up for an Easter gathering or an Easter service and expecting it to mean more than it felt like it did. Maybe you found yourself walking away with more questions than you had before, or wondering if there's just something that you're missing that other people seem to be getting. Several years ago, I came across this reflection called Easter Doubt, and it was so helpful for me. It's this beautifully, honestly written reflection by an author, Rachel Held Evans, and she talks about her experience of wrestling through some doubt and questions around the Easter story. And when I first came in contact with it, it was so helpful for me because it gave me permission to be honest about some of the questions that I was in the midst of wrestling with, and to begin to see them not as something that I needed to hide from or stuff down a little deeper or pretend weren't there. But I began to see some of those questions and doubts as perhaps an opportunity to actually go deeper, to discover some things about God that I hadn't been able to see before. And that's exactly what's happened since. It's been such an important part of my story, such a vital part of my spiritual growth since that time has been being honest about the doubts and the questions that I have instead of running away from them. I have found this quote from Frederick Buechner to be really true for me. He said, "Doubts are like ants in the pants of faith. They keep it awake and moving." And, I still listen to that same reflection every Easter morning. This is a QR code. You can access it on YouTube if it's something that you want to listen to at some point this week. And, now when I listen to it, I come with a pretty different perspective. I've worked through a lot of the questions that I was wondering when I first encountered it. But now, for me, it's meaningful because it reminds me that I will come in contact with so many people who are in exactly that place. That there are people in this room and everywhere we go that are singing words to songs that we aren't sure we believe. People for whom just showing up to a place like this is a huge deal. And so I just want to say to you, if that's you, if that's where you are, we are so glad that you're here. Crosspoint's designed for you to have a place where you can honestly show up just as you are. And we know, we've experienced that doubts and questions are like a raised foot. They can take us one way or the other. They either lead us forward or they cause us to take a step back from God. And so we hope that what you experience here will help you to take a step closer. Another reason I think sometimes we miss some of what Easter can mean for us, maybe for you it's not about doubts and questions, but it's that we show up without giving it much time or thought ahead of time. Life's busy, and Easter is one of those holidays that has a way of sneaking right up on us. And so we find ourselves skipping to the climax of the story, but it doesn't mean as much because we haven't spent any time in the tension that's meant to lead us there. Think about the most moving final episode of a series or end of a movie that you've ever seen. And now imagine watching just that scene without having seen anything that comes before it. Just the final episode or just tuning into the movie right at the end. It wouldn't mean the same thing without all the context attached to it. A couple of examples that you may resonate with. Any Friends fans in the room? Yeah? So maybe not, but if you were a person who was really into Friends, then this picture means something to you. It may even conjure up some emotions, but if you didn't watch it, it's just a door, right? Another one, this is, for me, the Americans is, I think, probably the best series finale that I've ever watched. But, if you watch this scene without having seen the rest of the show, it's kind of a boring piece of television, actually. It doesn't mean as much without the context. And this is so often what we do with Easter. And so our hope today is that we will be able to begin this week together in a way that will hopefully help you to experience Easter at a deeper level this year, for it to mean all that it can mean in your life. This weekend begins what many call Holy Week, where Christians all around the world remember the events of Jesus' final week. Now, get this is crazy to me. I didn't know this until this week. 40% of the gospel accounts of the first-person narratives of Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John are actually devoted to just this week of Jesus' life. It makes up 0.1% of the time that he spent on earth, and yet they spend most of the space that they have telling the story of what he said and did and experienced, because there was so much that mattered in the midst of those days. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to attempt to walk us through all of that. It's way more than we can cover. But what I want to encourage you to do is to spend some time this week immersing yourself in that story. Walking through the things that Jesus walked through during his final week, looking at what he said, what he did, what he experienced. And there's a couple of ways that we would love to help you do this. The first is all of next week, Monday through Friday from 11:30 to 1:30, this space in the venue at Crosspoint is going to be an open space for anyone who wants to come and just carve out some time to connect with God, to pray, to be in this space. We'll have some tools available that will help you to engage some of this story, and they'll build as we go. So if you show up every day, there'll be a new thing for you to experience each day. If you are just off work on Friday this week, and that's the only day you can make it, you'll come and get to walk through all of it. So we would love, if this is something that you're looking for, if you want to carve out some time this week, come and join us. We'll be here each day. Another option, I know that's not feasible for all of us, and so you can also do this from wherever you are. If you want on your own, you can kind of we've created a reading plan for you that will help you to kind of walk through each day of that Monday through Friday of Jesus's final week. And so you can take a picture of this. You'll see what we have here is mostly from Mark's perspective, because Mark is the writer who kind of gets to the point. He makes sure that we know everything that we need to know, but he doesn't add a lot of fluff. But then as you get to Thursday and Friday, we've added John's perspective, because John adds some details that the others don't include that I think are really helpful in giving us a picture of why these days matter. So would encourage you in whatever way works for you to perhaps make this your next step. You can even mark this on your card and let us know, you know what, this week I'm going to spend some time walking through what Jesus said and did through his final week. Today, though, for the rest of the time, we're going to look at the events that kicked off this week, the Sunday part of the story. And I want to point out some themes to pay attention to that are going to keep showing up throughout the rest of the week. A few big ideas that I think are pretty important for us to notice. Now, to set the stage, Jesus and his disciples, along with thousands of other Jewish people, were headed into the city of Jerusalem for this event called Passover. Every year during this time, the city of Jerusalem would swell to over double, some think even 4 to 5 times its normal population, as everyone came to town for this holiday. It probably felt a little like the towns where some of you went for spring break, where it's like they don't have the capacity for this. Or maybe like Speedway, Indiana on Indy 500 weekend. Although probably a little less rowdy, but who knows? I don't know what they did all week. But John tells us, starting in verse 12, that the news that Jesus was on his way to Jerusalem started to sweep through the city. And so this large crowd of Passover visitors took palm branches, these symbols of revolution, and they went down to the road to meet him. They shouted, "Hosanna! Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord, the King of Israel." Jesus found a young donkey and rode on it, fulfilling the prophecy that said, "Don't be afraid, people of Jerusalem. Look, your king is coming, riding on a donkey's colt." Now, this may be a familiar scene for you. It may not. Growing up, I always kind of pictured this as this like happy, clappy parade, like something you might experience at Disney World. But that's not exactly what's happening here. See, Hosanna literally means save now. It has this tone of desperation. And this whole phrase, Hosanna, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord, this comes from a psalm, Psalm 118. And if you go and read Psalm 118, you'll find that there is some celebration in it. There's a lot of giving thanks to God for his goodness, for his steadfast love that endures forever. But it also has lines like this: "Out of my distress, I called on God. My enemies surrounded and attacked me. They swarmed me like bees. I was right on the cliff edge, ready to fall." See, this crowd surrounding Jesus is full of people who are at the end of their rope. People who are saying, "Jesus, we can't keep going on the way that we've been going. We've tried to make it. We're trying everything we can, but we need help. We're tired. We're in over our heads. So please, would you save us like now?" Maybe you can relate to those feelings. I know that I can. The good news for those who were in the crowd that day and for us is that rescue is exactly what Jesus was on his way to do. He was coming to save them. But the bad news for them is that his approach was not going to look anything like what they expected. See, they were looking for a leader who would come and overthrow the powers that be, who would take charge politically, but that's not what Jesus came to do. This is why so many of them would turn on him by the end of the week, because they just couldn't understand that though Jesus had no intention of saving them the way that they wanted, he was about to give everything so that they could have what they actually needed. They knew what they wanted, though, and what they wanted was a king. They would soon find out that though Jesus had spent a lot of time talking about this kingdom he was in the process of establishing, it wouldn't be a kingdom like they imagined. It wouldn't fit their agenda. It wouldn't look the way that they'd hoped. If Palm Sunday is about anything, it's a story of disappointed expectations. It's a story about what happens when the God that we want, the God that we think we know, doesn't show up. And another God, a less aggressive, less predictable God, shows up instead. See, this week reminds us how easy it is to let our expectations get in the way. And so one question that I would encourage us to spend some time wrestling with this week is, what are the expectations that I've been carrying? Is there anything that I might need to let go of? Maybe expectations of what my life should look like or where I'd be by now. Expectations about what I deserve. Perhaps you find yourself feeling disappointed by people around you, the ways that they've mistreated you, maybe by some seemingly unanswered prayers. What are the unmet expectations that you have been dragging around with you? I wonder if this week may be an invitation for you to begin to live in relationship to life as it actually is, instead of life as you expect it should be. Another piece I think we need to understand about Jesus entering into the city of Jerusalem is that Jesus is not surprised by what's happening. He's not caught off guard by the response of the crowd. Often when I've read this story, I've pictured him being like, oh, shucks, like, you don't need to do all that. Everybody quiet down. It don't need to make such a big deal. There's other places where he does react in similar ways to that, but not here. See, he is coming into Jerusalem humbly, but not modestly. He knows exactly what will happen, and he's planned it to be this way. The other three versions of the story, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, all spend quite a bit of time describing how Jesus gives these very specific instructions to some of his disciples about go get this donkey. He tells them exactly where to go, exactly what to say, what to do. He's orchestrated this moment. Jesus also knew that he wouldn't be the only person making an entrance into the city of Jerusalem that day. That on the other side of the city, the Roman governor Pilate would also be riding into the city, but on a war horse, surrounded by soldiers, coming as this public reminder to the crowd who had gathered in Jerusalem who was in charge and what would happen to them if they dared to disturb the peace. What Jesus is doing here is he is making an intentional, bold statement. He's setting himself up as the public alternative to the current system that had caused this desperation that so many in the crowd were feeling. He doesn't come quietly into the city. He doesn't slip under the radar. He forces the issue. He essentially dares the powers that be. You can either crown me or kill me. Why does he do this? Because he knows that the path to change, the way forward to new life, includes confronting the way things are. So often, I think we want to experience resurrection. We want to experience new things in our lives, but we forget that for resurrection to be possible, something has to die. Jesus speaks to this in the first words that John records after he enters Jerusalem, as he tells his followers, you know, that time that I've been telling you about, now the time has come. This is it. Remember, if a seed is unplanted, it remains just one seed. But if it dies, if it falls to the earth and enters the ground, it will grow and become many seeds. You're probably seeing evidence of this in your yard or in your neighborhood. I love this time of year. As we begin to see plants grow and trees, buds, we're reminded of this reality. Jesus goes on, he says, the ones who love the kind of life that this world gives will lose the very life that they're looking for. But the ones who let go of life in the world and follow my ways instead will find the life of the world to come that will never fade away. A life full of beauty and harmony. There's a lot that we could unpack here, but part of what Jesus is saying to us simply is that nothing changes if nothing changes. If you want your life to look different, if you want to experience new things, if you want to grow closer to God, then you've got to make a move. You have to take a step to shake up your normal in some way. For some of you this week, that step might be a step into the waters of baptism. I think part of what makes the experience of baptism so powerful is that it's so out of our norm. It requires courage and boldness to not only stand up in front of a crowd and say, hey, this is what God's been doing in my life. I'm choosing to follow him, but also to get soaking wet in front of a crowd of people. It's this crazy thing. And yet this is what Jesus invites us to do, to take this courageous step. Last year was the first time that Crosspoint that we decided to have baptism as part of our Easter weekend experience. And I always love getting to be a part of people's baptisms. I mean, it's some of the highlights of my career and just some of my favorite things to get to experience. But that weekend in particular was just unreal. To get to be a part of some of the stories that unfolded throughout that time was amazing. And for me, one of them that was really personal was my nephew. Actually surprised all of us by being one of the people who decided to step forward and to walk through the waters of baptism that weekend. And it was so cool to get to be a part of that moment with him. But what was even cooler, perhaps, was later that day, I overheard him having a conversation with his younger sister. And she was telling him how, I was starting to feel like maybe I should go forward. I kind of want to. I kind of think I'm ready for that step. But I was just so scared. So I stayed where I was. And my nephew responded to his little sister, and he said, I was scared too. And then he started to tell her how it was worth it to him to go anyways, to go scared. Maybe for you, it's time for you to take the opportunity to make a move, to go scared, and to see what might unfold when you do. If this is something that you're at all contemplating, if you've got questions about what this might look like for you next weekend, I would love to have a conversation with you. I'll be out in the conference room or just in front of there after this service if you're in the room. Or online, we've got a page where you can kind of explore and perhaps get a lot of your questions answered. You can submit a form to let us know you're interested, and we would love to reach out and have a conversation with you about that this week. Maybe for you, that's a step that you've already taken. You've walked the waters or been baptized before, but perhaps for you this week, it would serve you to spend some time wrestling with this question. Is there anything in my life that needs to be confronted? Is there anything that is normal, a habit, a pattern, a rhythm that might actually be getting in the way of some of the new life that God is trying to lead me toward? As we think about Jesus' entry into Jerusalem, there's one more piece that I want to make sure we don't miss, because it's easy to miss. But it would have been obvious to the people who were there at that time. It has to do with something else that was happening in the city of Jerusalem that day. See, we have come to refer to this event, to this day, as Palm Sunday, but it had a different name back then. See, everyone in Jerusalem at that time knew this day as Lamb Selection Sunday. Now, not quite as fun as our version of Selection Sunday, I don't think, but Lamb Selection Sunday, basically the whole reason that people were coming to town for Passover is they believed that the temple in Jerusalem was their ticket to getting close to God. That if they wanted to get right with God, they needed to offer up a lamb to be sacrificed, to make up for all of their screw-ups, their shortcomings that year. And so part of the tradition of Passover was bringing thousands of lambs into the city so that families who were traveling there could actually purchase them to use as part of this ritual. You may wonder where all those lambs came from. Well, they came from a nearby small town you may have heard of called Bethlehem that was actually known for raising lambs for Passover. See, on that same day that Jesus was entering Jerusalem, there's all of these lambs that are also being brought into the city, inspected to make sure that they were perfect, that they were worthy of being sacrificed. And I'll be honest, the whole sacrificial system that we see in the Old Testament, I've still got a lot of questions about that. I'm not totally convinced that it was actually God's idea. But what we know for sure is that for hundreds of years, it was exactly what people thought God wanted and needed from them. A sacrifice that made forgiveness possible. Well, we also know for sure, one thing that's really clear in this story of Jesus' final week, beginning with his entrance into the city on Lamb Selection Sunday, is that Jesus came to put an end to all of it. To be the Lamb who takes away the sin of the world. To be the once and for all conduit of forgiveness. See, this week we remember that Jesus came as he did so that we might come as we are. He came to help us see that there is absolutely nothing that can separate us from his love for us. There's no hoops that we need to jump through. There's no religious games that we need to play. This week is about Jesus demonstrating to us that there is nothing he would not give to be close to you. He came as he did so that you can come just as you are. He came willingly, intentionally, boldly, not a victim of an angry God demanding a sacrifice, but the fullness of God in human form. As a way of promising us, listen, I want you to know how much I love you. I will love you more than you can ever imagine, unconditionally. That is what we are celebrating next weekend. And we believe that there are some good things that God wants to do in your life. And so the final question that I want to ask you tonight is, will you be open to the things that God might have in store for you this week? Beginning right now, in this moment. I want to invite you to go ahead and stand with us. We're going to sing one more song together, and I hope that as we do this, that you will lean in, that you'll really take in and consider these words, and to open yourself up to what it is that God might want to speak specifically to you, to the work that He may be beginning right now. Let's sing this together.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Take a moment to follow our podcast on your preferred platform, and be sure to download our app to stay informed on everything happening here at Crosspoint. And if you like what you heard today, don't hesitate to share it with a friend that might need to hear it too.